Millicent, nice to meet everybody here. I work in Oracle's Global IT Risk Management Group. I'm in charge of the Security Operations Center. So I have a global team of hackers, geeks, dweebs, all kinds of different people located all around the world. So just so you know, this is all my opinion. This is nothing to do with Oracle, right? And what I'm going to show you today is really about our operations, how we do things. And I hope to make this interactive, right? And I hope you guys will, ask questions and kind of go through, but I'm trying to make it a little bit informal. Magesh gave me all of one day to put this together. He contacted me on Friday at probably, what time was it? It was like...
Took away your Saturday.
Yeah, he's like, he's lucky I was on vacation, and he said, I need somebody to do a talk, and you gotta do it. And I'm like, okay, what am I doing a talk on? And he's like, well, just do anything, kind of thing. So I said, okay, well, I'll try to put something together for you.
And you had tickets to the World Cup practice sessions.
I did. No, I didn't. Actually, So, yeah, put this together. I wanted to give an overview about our security operations and how we do things, but I wanted to give a little background about, so I came to Oracle through an acquisition, actually a company that was acquired here in Frisco called Skywire. Me and Magesh both worked there. I've been in risk management ever since then. I rose through the ranks. I was an individual contributor, and now I'm actually in charge of like I said, a global team of geeks and dweebs, and it's a lot of fun. So on with our presentation, if I can do this. Why is this? There. All right. So 5 years ago, right, my boss, my current boss, came to me and said, what do we need to do, right? And he said, Conan, what is best in security? No, he said, Peter, what should we be doing, right? And I said, what we need to do is we need to formalize our security operations center, right? We need to start hunting for threats out on our network, right? And we need to operationalize our threat intelligence, right? And that's kind of what I'm going to be showing you what we did. And again, go ahead.
Could you kind of define what you mean by operationalizing your threat intelligence?
We will get to that.
Okay.
We will get to that because that's a very important question. And hopefully I'll be able to tell you. So again, we worked in risk management and we had a lot of different, Oracle's a big company and risk management did a lot of different things, right? So we did vulnerability scanning, we did compliance, we did all of these things, but we weren't very formal in what we were doing. And we were finding out that a lot of different teams, someone was scanning, we were scanning as well, and we wouldn't find out about it until we actually contacted the same owner and said, at the same time going, hey, we found the same issues, and they're going, which one of you guys do we need to report to, right? It's like, who are we supposed to, is it you guys, is it us? So, it was kind of all over the place. And what we needed to do is we needed to come up with a framework. And that was the first thing that we decided to come up with. So our frameworks, there's a lot of different frameworks when it comes to a SOC, or Security Operations Centers, right? There's NIST has theirs, ISC, SANS has theirs. The one that we chose was MITRE, right? And the reason we chose it is because there was a lot of different capabilities within it that we could assign. It had a broader view of the entire SOC versus a very incident response oriented. And then the other thing that we came up with is we wanted to define our mission and our scope, right? And having that clearly defined allows all of the people who are participating in the SOC the ability to be able to see, okay, this is what our mission is. This is when they get that ambiguous kind of question, should we be handling this, right? They can look at the mission and they can say, okay, this is part of our mission. Or they can look at our scope and they can say, this is part of our scope. And if not, then they know that they can say, okay, this is not what's something we should be doing, right? Because Oracle is, again, a big company. We're not the only SOC, right? The cloud people have their SOC. The lines of businesses have their SOC. We even have physical SOCs, right? So, for the global...
You spy on each other?
No, we don't spy on anybody. There's no spying in Oracle. But one of the things that we came up with was using this framework from MITRE, which is freely available. Anybody can download this, the framework itself, is we're able to make what we call as the honeycomb, right? So within here, you see it all feeds from threat intelligence, right? And the red area is actually the area that I'm in charge of specifically, right? So I'm the one who has a team of threat intelligence, real-time analysis, advanced analysis, incident response and analysis, and then we have other groups within risk management who are doing the other areas, right? So you'll see asset management, remediation, scanning and assessment, outreach, which is a big part as well, analytics, workflows, all that kind of stuff. And that's why we chose the MITRE framework to do what we're doing, right? So the first part, when you're setting up,
Bill, if you don't mind, take a minute and talk about MITRE. Not everyone knows MITRE.
Okay.
How good they do the work, for the government.
sure,
MITRE.
MITRE, yes.
Just a minute, what's the
Right.
company does,
So MITRE started out back in the 80s, a long time ago. They're a nonprofit organization. They're kind of like NIST, which is another organization. But they really started out with the sole purpose of dealing with trying to organize all of the security stuff and really putting frameworks around it. So a lot of people have heard of ISO, have heard of NIST, and MITRE is another one of those groups. So all vulnerabilities that get reported up to vendors usually go through MITRE, right? So they have the CVS, they're the ones who came up with that. They're kind of like a think tank, and a lot of businesses use them because of those, the ideas that they come up with. So.
I have a question, if you don't mind. The outreach section, is that where teaching users would be
Could be
included?
teaching users, and we'll go into the sub-capabilities. You're going to ask good questions. All right. So here's the sub-capabilities of each one of those in our capabilities, right? So what we try to do is we try to make it so where every one of these capabilities have sub-capabilities, right? So that we can focus, and then each one gets assigned to a manager, right? And then they can focus on those individual sub-capabilities. And so like you say, outreach, right? We have within there, product assessment, security consulting, which could be user, right? Training and awareness building, right? Situational awareness, redistribution of tactics, techniques, and procedures, or TTPs, and media relations, right? So we have a manager who has a team of people that's all they do, right? They're the ones reaching out to users, they're doing all this kind of stuff. So the ones that I'm going to be focusing on today, right, for my team is threat intel, right? We'll go over a little bit on hunting, right, advanced analysis, and also the red team, right? So on each one of these areas, and somebody brought it up, the previous, presenter, I can't remember his name, but he was talking about all the different areas that you can get involved with on the security side, right? This right here as a framework is really a more defined area, right? Because to me, if you want to be in compliance and audit, he said PCI and HIPAA, right? We have a section on here for, scanning and assessments, right? That's involves with our compliance side. Asset management, remediation, all of those different things. If you look at the broader scope, right, rather than an individual, and put it in within each one of these sub-capabilities or within a capability, gives it a lot more focus. So this was actually taken from ISC, the SANS organization, right? We did not come up with this one, but we used this as part of our goal as we moved our SOC forward, right? So we wanted to make sure that everybody hears about people, process, technology, right? And what we wanted to do is really put a focus on these individual areas to show how they relate with each other, right? So as we were building out our SOC, we were building out all these different areas within within our people. So we set up formal training, on-the-job experience, vendor-specific training, all that kind of stuff. And then we went into the processes, building our SOPs, doing our recovery, containment, eradication, and then we went into our technology, and we try to make it so where, as a viewpoint, this is what drives our SOC forward. We keep using people, process, and technology. And within our technology, you can see a number of different secure, or what do you call it, different areas of technology that we use to do our incident response. Here is something that's kind of interesting. So one of the things as we matured our SOC, we started using development ideas. And actually, I should stop myself. How many here are developers, like right now? How many here are in IT as a system administrator? How many here are network administrators? So how many here is completely outside of IT right now? Like, all right. How many here are just in IT in general? Like, okay. How many here are in security? All right. Wow.
Room full of geeks.
So this should come, this is something that we've been driving for the last probably 3 years, right? And this is just an example of how we're using epics and use cases that we're stealing from developers, right? Developers like to use epics, right? And then use cases to show how they're doing things, right? And so what we did was we kind of appropriated, right, their ideas, and we do this a lot, right? We appropriated how they, track their epics and their use cases to show the work that they're going to be doing or the product to make it better, right? And we came up with this model to actually show the use cases. And so here is just a malware epic, right? And just to define it, it's really simple. As a company, we want to detect, analyze, and ultimately prevent malware from devices on its network to increase security, protect confidential information, and prevent damage to our brand, right? And the first use case, in this column over here, these are all just the descriptions and what they are, right? Is we want the use case is detection of malware coming in via the web, right? And we may have other use cases, detect malware coming in through email. And then we may have others. And we have a whole bunch of these epics defined, right? And what we try to do is we try to make it so where, we define what the use case is, then we define, how our data, where are we getting our information from, and then we do a kind of a gap analysis, and we can maintain this moving forward so that we can see exactly how we're presenting this information to upper management. So if anybody ever comes to us and says, hey, what's the use case? Why do we need to have, a FireEye system or an IPS or whatever? We can say, okay, here's all the use cases that we have mapped out, right? And here's how they cover it. This is what our current percentage is and how we're going to get there. This is why we think this is important. So that's kind of really high level, but I'm hoping you guys can use this as ideas. So I just wanted to throw that out. Is there any questions on this? All right, so finally get to the good stuff. All right. So the second area that my boss said, what should we be focusing on? And I said threat intelligence. This was 5 years ago. And this was at a time when people were talking about the pew-pew maps, right? And you still see them today, right? Norse was a big one. This is actually ThreatBut, which is a joke against all pew-pew maps. And pew-pew maps are basically, in the security realm, are maps you show to executives or on the screen in your SOC, right? That show that you're detecting things, but you're not actually able to use the information, right? Because really, what can you do if you see an attack on a screen like Norse threat intelligence had, at that time was really big. And they used to have their map, and you would see attacks coming from Russia over to the US. But how can you use that information? You can't, right? There's no way you can look at a map in real time and be able to use it in real time, right? And ThreatBut actually came up, and this map is still available at I think it's threatbut.com/map, right? But it'll say stuff in here. It'll be like, an attack from this one against premium info, or what do you call it? It's good for business. It's super effective. It's like this. They're worthless, right? But that was the original idea with threat intelligence when it first started. Probably about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, was the information was just out there, presented in a big screen, and everybody went, "Ooh, that's really cool." But it wasn't a way to operationalize it, right?
So how does Oracle utilize threat intelligence?
This is how we use it, right? So I'm going to explain. We actually came up with this model, right? Because we went to a lot of different vendors, probably about 5 years ago. We talked to the Mandiants, the FireEyes, the CrowdStrikes, the iSights, all the different vendors, and said we need to come up with a model, right? And again, I talk a lot about models, but it'll feed into the final ideas, right? And this is the model we came up with, and we wanted to create in the center a threat library, right? This is going to be our central point where we're going to have all threats and information being brought into, and then we're going to use it as all of our threat analysts are going to use that information and they're going to distribute it all over the place, right? So I'll walk you through this.
Will you be sharing the deck, or else we'll take a picture of this one?
You can take a picture.
So basically answer this now.
Yeah. I mean, I have it on PDF, so if you want it on PDF.
Yeah, can you make your slides available?
Yeah, I can do that. I mean, if you want to see my memes.
I'll take the PDF and you can email us later.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
All right. So, threat library, right? It's a central point that keeps all of the information, right? What it does is it's consolidator of all your feeds. Think of it kind of like your central logging system, right? But think of it more like it's just threat data, right? And if you can put it into, and it doesn't matter what that particular library is made from, we use a product called Threat Quotient, right? There are a number of free products out there like SIFS, and there's Threat Connect, and there's other vendors out there that do this now, right? We chose ThreatQ because it was very new, and they were further along than the rest of them. But this is basically the source, right? It pulls the information into it, and then it allows you to distribute it out. So if you look at it, these are external feeds, right? This is your threat intelligence as it's coming into your company, right? And it could be coming from commercial feeds like iSight, CrowdStrike, Symantec, McAfee, any of those vendors, and we use all of those, right? And then you can have open source intelligence, right? And there's a number of open source intelligence sources out there, right? So there is the Tor exit nodes, right? You want to keep track of who on your network is actually accessing your Tor, right? Or who is coming into or hitting your websites from Tor, right? That there's sources for that. There's free malware feeds, all that, so we call that open source intelligent feeds, right? Then we have private feeds, which we get from other people, vetted friends. We share information with them, they share information with us, we pull that in. Then we have our vendor feeds as well, right? So specific vendors like, we may use, Symantec or whatever, we can pull in their feed and we can pull it all in. So the threat library takes all this information, right? And it takes, MD5s, right? Or SHA-256, which everybody is going to because of the clashing of MD5s.
Right.
Takes IPs, indicators of compromise, IOCs, domains, attackers, signatures, right? And then within there, we do an analysis, and this is where our threat intelligence people work on a day-to-day basis, and I have about 5 people who do this, and that's all they do. So they take in this information, they analyze it, they try to figure out, okay, what is the information we need to push out and actually start detecting, right? Or they go, okay, well, let's just put it off to the side, right? Let's just keep that around, but we're not really that concerned.
How do they make that decision? Whether
How do they make that decision? Hopefully in a smart manner. So that's a good.
Do you have a tool to do the analysis, or is it manual?
So the tool itself does help with that analysis. So an idea that we came up with is like you have a commercial feed, right? And you have 2 different vendors, and they're not talking to each other. And they say, hey, IP address Peter is bad, right? And they both report it, right? And then the analysis would be, if you see more than one vendor reporting that as bad, right? Instead of just pushing it out into a sensor to actually start detecting it, right? Instead, push it out to start blocking it, right? Because this is so bad, let's do this, right? So those decision trees happen, and we have all those SOPs defined for the threat analysts so that they can make those decisions and figure out what they need to do.
So the consensus opinions can prioritize your action.
Exactly. But again, it comes down to, how we track our individual threat actors, right? That's really specifically important for them, right? Because sometimes that's the biggest decision for us. Like if we have we're tracking a threat actor who only attacks Russian companies, right? We're not a Russian company, right? So we're not kind of worried about them. So the analyst has to go, put that one to the side, right? Those are the kind of decisions that the analyst has to make, right? So they're using their noggin, right?
The analyst is low level, so,
No, the analysts, our threat analysts are at a higher level.
oh, okay,
Right,
so
so
they have some
they're at tier 4.
authoritative power.
Yes, they totally do, right? And we'll get into the reason why threat intelligence, if we go back to that other slide, real quick here. You see, threat intelligence feeds everything else. Everything comes from threat intelligence, right? It feeds into your advanced analysis, your incident response, your real-time analysis, which then feeds into all the rest, right? It all comes in through threat intelligence. If you look at this is coming into this honeycomb here, and then it's spreading out, right? So we'll go back to that other slide. All right. So back here. So the analyst is making that decision, and he's pushing information out to the security sensors, right? And this can be your IDS, your FireEye, your proxy, your LAN cope, your network, whatever, right? But those sensors also have feeds that are not available to your threat library, right? So they have their own feeds that are feeding into it, right? And then we follow this up, and then they send their alerts when they detect something over into your SIM, right? And the same thing, this threat library is sending the information over to the SIM, right? And then the SIM is the point where it actually detects alerts, right, or incidents, and that's what triggers your incident response, right? Creates an SR, and then puts it back in. Now, one of the things that we have done here is we've closed this loop, right, when it comes to our incident response, because this information now feeds back into our threat library that says, Peter, trigger an alert for this particular IP address for this particular malware.
The time between the sensor to a SIM to an SR and back to the library is awfully long.
Nope.
I'll tell you, especially from SIM to SRs, I know how it works in the SR world. Unless it becomes a level 1, if it's an SR3 or an SR4, which is a non-production support, it sits in the only SR database. No?
So this is all, as soon as the sensor detects it, right, as soon as this information from the threat library is pushed up, and we push it up every 5 minutes, right? So we're pushing all of this information up into our sensors. These sensors are then monitoring. As soon as that alert goes into the SIM, and the SIM sees that information, and it has a rule and an SOP based on it, it's automatically triggering an SR.
So it's a SIM on SR? With a hyper-
We do not define our SRs with P1, P2, P3, right? We consider everything P1, right? And we have a 24/7, 365 team that is constantly monitoring all of those SRs, right?
Does this model require that you select only one available SIM, or is there a possibility of using 2 or 3?
We use multiples, and we'll get into that here shortly, because we have over here what we call subscribers, right? So when we push, this is our model going into where we're
I have a
talking about.
question here.
Yes.
So the information that's going to the sensors and the information that's going to the SIM is the same?
It is the same. And the reason is because not all your sensors, right, are going to have the same logs that the SIM does, right, or the same data. So like say for instance on here, your sensor is not a firewall, right, or is not a switch. But your switch is sending logs over to the SIM, right? Your firewall is sending logs over to the SIM, and that's why we're pushing that information into the SIM as well.
Does your SIM also accept packets or just logs?
We do packets as well. So we do layer 7 packets on our SIM as our part of our flows, but we also use LAN cope as part of our net flows. So we use LAN cope out there, and our SIM actually does flows as well.
Okay.
So what SIMs you are using? What SIMs?
Log analytics.
He's talking
Log
about.
analytics, right?
I am not at liberty to say.
What I say as a customer is log analytics.
It's not a login in news.
But they gave it to us?
No, it's not. No, we don't use that. No, it's a big SIM. I'll give you that. It's the biggest SIM out there, and it's not Splunk.
It's huge.
It's huge. So there's only one other one out there that's as big as Splunk, right? Customer base, and that's the one we use.
ServiceNow, okay.
What's that?
ServiceNow.
Nope.
That's
No.
okay.
So what does LAN cope does? We know what is proxy, but what is LAN cope does?
LAN cope is NetFlows. NetFlows. So it takes all your switches, send their NetFlows, firewalls, VPN devices. They send their NetFlows over to the LAN cope system, StealthWatch, which is now owned by Cisco. The reason why why we do flows in our SIM as well is because our SIM works at layer 7, LandCope works at NetFlow layer, and I don't think 5, 4, 3.
Session.
3.
Are you saying session layer or session?
Yeah, it doesn't get the packet layer, right?
Oh,
It doesn't get the apps.
Okay.
Whereas our SIM, when we have covers with our flows, we actually have application layer data, so layer 7.
So,
Is it the net witness same?
Is it what?
Net witness?
Nope, it's not NetWitness. It's the
What is
biggest one.
FireEye?
No.
they're still testing it. So is this only for Oracle or for all your cloud products also?
So this is for global IT. So I work for global IT. They have their own models or whatever. We have shared this. Since we worked on this 4 years ago, we have shared it with them and they are using this model as well.
So this whole thing that you've developed, it had to be done with quite a bit of collaboration,
Between,
you and other departments.
not really, this is all global IT. So most of
That's
this,
all within your control?
yeah. So most of this collaboration that we came up with was mostly done with Mandiant, right? Because they were the furthest along in the incident response and coming up with threat intelligence. Mandiant and FireEye are the ones that we vetted this against. When we talked to Gartner, when we talked to Forrester, they were like, well, we don't even know how to do that yet. So,
Sorry, what is
So-
FireEye?
FireEye? FireEye is a big company, security-wise. Their main products are malware analysis, sandboxing on the network. They do web, email, but they also own Mandiant, which does instant response, and they have their MER client. So that's all getting merged together. So that's FireEye. So it's malware analysis. So, and the way to look at it is every file that comes through the proxy, right? Once it's downloaded, FireEye will spin up a VM and will explode it and see if it does any callbacks and if it considers it malware, and then it'll trigger an alert into the SIM, which then triggers the SR, and then we action it.
So what goes to the data warehouse?
Good question. So that's actually our next section, right? So the SIM is where we do real-time analysis, right? Our data warehouse is where we store everything that's not in the SIM. That's like, we use about 90 days in the SIM, right? Because we have so many logs. And then we ship everything over to into our big data warehouse, right? And here is one of the areas, and we'll get into this in the next slide, but we also send the same level of IOCs, right? Not only out to our sensors, not only out to our SIM, but we're sending that into our data warehouse because the SIM is only from this point forward and 90 days, right? And the data warehouse is from this point forward to 7 years
Backwards.
backwards.
So it goes from threat library or SIM directly pushes to the data warehouse?
So it goes from threat library into, the SIM has a connector into pushing the data into the data warehouse, but I don't have that. This is all just IOCs.
So it's a data warehouse for the threats?
Correct. Well, it's not just, well, the data warehouse is not just for the threats, it's all the logs. So 7 years of logs are in your data warehouse, right? And we'll get into the model of how we do this. So then we have other IOCs that are feeding into the threat library, and this is our manual imports, right? So if we have raw data, any SR tickets that are not associated with the SIM, or we have non-vendor intel, we can push that into the threat library. Again, that same information is used by the analysis, pushed out to the sensors and triggers alerts, right? And then we have our malware analysis as well, where we actually pull malware off the network, do whatever, we analyze it, we either reverse it, we put it into our sandboxing system like Cuckoo, whatever. We do forensics on the endpoints, we pull the malware off of there, we do our analysis, and then we push that information in the threat library. The analyst then looks at it again and then says, okay, I'm marking this active, the SIM gets it, gets an alert, triggers an SR, and now we have a complete loop.
How did you come up with the decision to keep it only 7 years? Was there some sort of,
Compliance and legal.
because like IRS is a 7-year window, it's similar type of
So that's a legal decision, and
Okay.
the legal team at Oracle said
7 years, and that's what you
7
need. Okay,
Yeah.
so that didn't come from your department?
No,
it
no,
came
no.
from legal, right?
No, that all comes from, we have work hand in hand with privacy and legal at all times.
So after 7 years, you don't care?
No, we do. So then we have that's what we have to keep in real time or near time.
Oh, that's real time?
Yeah. So,
Near time.
yeah. So that's where we are at, but we have compliance issues where we have some data that's historic for 15 to 20 years. Right? And we are a big company.
Right.
So the tickets of the SRs create they fix the use case you showed before, so which would create them? The tickets?
Correct. So that use case feeds into the SIM, right? We have SOPs defined for those rules, and we would then say, okay, for every one of those, that would create an SR ticket, and then that get actioned and pushed into an incident response plan that then feeds back into the threat intelligence, right?
How many people total work in this whole,
My org, I have about 40, right? So 40, we're going up to 44. So I have a team in India, Romania. We follow the sun, right? So we go India, Romania, Guadalajara,